All right, welcome to today's webinar presenting OSHA's top 10 most frequently cited standards for 2012. My name is Brian McKendry. I'm working with construction safety experts, and this webinar is hosted by Allied. Just a little bit about the company before we start the webinar. What we do, primarily we are a complete safety consulting organization. Do qualified operator training for crane operators. We also do rigger and signal person training, forklift, aerial lift, accident investigation. We'll also conduct OSHA, MSHA trainings and develop programs, just a variety of safety-related items for anybody that is needing that type of service. All right, so we'll just kind of jump right into the webinar today, and again, just talking about OSHA's top 10 for 2012. We'll just kind of do the rundown. At number 10 is electrical system design. Number 9, machines. This mainly deals with guards and guarding of machinery, and we'll jump in that and kind of talk a little bit when we discuss about that one. Ladders, electrical wiring methods, components and equipment, powered industrial trucks. Most of us commonly refer to those as forklifts. Control of energy or hazardous energy, lockout, tagout, respiratory protection, scaffolding, hazard communication standard, and the number 1 most frequently cited standard for 2012 is fall protection. All right, fall protection, the specific standard that applies to that was mostly cited was 29 CFR 1926-501, which deals primarily with fall protection in the construction industry. Standard addresses the employer's duty to have fall protection for their employees. Means that any fall exposure 6 feet or greater, the employer must provide a means of protection, such as a guardrail system, safety net system, or personal fall arrest system. And in fall protection, I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail about that, but just to kind of explain a little bit about that. Anytime that someone is exposed to that fall of 6 feet or greater, certainly want to have a means of protection there. And fall arrest systems are probably the most common prevalent out there. They have a variety of different components to them. With fall arrest systems, you're going to have a harness and a lanyard or a retractable lifeline of some sort that will be attached to an anchorage point that will support 5,000 pounds of pressure. So there's a lot that goes into providing and making sure that you have the right fall protection. And obviously, this being the number 1 item on OSHA's list, it is a big topic for them as far as trying to address these concerns. Second one down on the list, there's been a lot of changes. The Hazard Communication Standard, 29 CFR 1910-1200. The purpose of this section is to ensure that hazards and all chemicals produced or imported are classified, and that the information concerning the classified hazard is transmitted to the employers and employees. And just a little note there, this text actually is updated or has been updated to align with the UN's globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals, or commonly referred to as GHS. This became effective in May of 2012. And certainly there's a lot to be aware of when it comes to this change in the hazard communication standard. Some of the big changes are going to be label changes. There's mandatory changes to the labeling system. I'm going to be talking about a signal word, pictograms, a hazard statement, and a precautionary statement. And you'll kind of see those on labels of products that will be purchased starting this year. You'll start to see a change in the labeling system from manufacturers for products that are purchased. Also, another change in there is safety data sheets. In the past, most safety individuals and people that are dealing with hazard communication referred to them as material safety data sheets. With this new alignment with the GHS, that's going to change to safety data sheets. And specifically, there's going to be 16-section format that will detail all the information about any chemical produced or distributed. Some of the key notes also to be aware of is that the big change that has come about, OSHA has mandated that all employers train their employees in all of these changes that are coming about by December 1st of this year, with full adoption and implementation slated for June 1st, 2016. So just something to be aware of. If you are not aware of this, I strongly encourage you to go to OSHA's website, osha.gov. There's a lot of helpful information in there about the changes that are occurring and information that you could certainly help educate your employees with. Next topic is scaffolding. Related typically to construction is 29 CFR 1926-451. Purpose of this standard section details general requirements for each scaffold and scaffold component utilized in construction. It specifically details the requirements for scaffold setup, use, and dismantling. In each scaffold, components are also outlined, such as the type of scaffold, planking, cross bracing, access and egress, ladders, etc. There's a variety of different issues when it comes to requirements in the scaffolding standard. Anybody dealing with a scaffold knows that anyone that is working with or erecting or creating a scaffold system needs to have someone that is competent in the components and understanding of scaffold systems and understanding of all fall-related activities, structures, the types of scaffolds that may be used, and all the security measures that are needed to make sure that the scaffolding is erected and put in place the correct way. So there's a lot of information in that standard that pertains to scaffolding. Certainly would warrant that closely. All right, next we're talking about respiratory protection. And this is geared mainly towards the general industry, but there's a lot of overlap with all industry, primarily with this. Anybody wearing a respirator certainly falls under this category. But it's addressed in 29 CFR 1910-134. Purpose of this standard discusses the use of respirators when effective engineering controls are not feasible in the control of those occupational diseases caused by breathing air contaminated with harmful dusts, fogs, fumes, mists, gas, smokes, sprays, or vapors that prevent atmospheric contamination. Respirators shall be provided to each employee when such equipment is necessary to protect the health of such employee. The employer shall provide the respirators which are applicable to and suitable for the intended or purpose intended. The employer shall be responsible for establishing it and the maintenance of respiratory protection program, which shall include the required outline in paragraph C of the section. This program shall cover each employee required by this section to use a respirator. And the big concern with respirator use, obviously, is first of all making sure that you've outlined and exhausted all opportunities to not have to wear a respirator to begin with. It's a last resort. You certainly want to look at any kind of engineering controls prior to that. And then once those are all exhausted and feel like this is the last line of defense, so to speak, and which it pretty much is for the wearer, end user. So you certainly want to make sure that anybody using a respirator, that you have a respiratory protection program in place which addresses certain activities. With respirator use, there's a lot of training issues that are involved in that, and also a lot of criteria based on the selection of the correct respirator for the particular situation that you may be experiencing. So anyone who is going to be wearing a respirator, obviously you want to have a questionnaire to determine whether or not they need to have a further investigation by a licensed medical professional and possibly conduct a pulmonary test on the individual. And this would ideally test an individual to make sure that they could, in fact, wear a respirator to begin with. A lot of times people who have respiratory problems may not be able to wear a respirator. So there's a lot of things that kind of go into that, making sure, again, that you have something in place to identify where these are and how you're going to be able to outfit employees with a possible respirator when and if needed. All right, next one on there is the control of hazardous energy, or lockout tagout as it's commonly referred to. And this particular one is addressed in the general industry, 29 CFR 1910-147. This standard covers the servicing and maintenance of machines and equipment in which the unexpected energizing or startup of machines or equipment or release of stored energy could harm employees. And this standard establishes minimum performance requirements for the control of such hazardous energy. And it applies to the control of energy during servicing and or maintenance of machines and equipment, and commonly obviously referred to lockout tagout. And lockout tagout, those of you that are not familiar with what that is, it is an isolation of the energy source for a particular machine or piece of equipment that may be serviced or repaired or some sort of maintenance done on it, where you need to have the energy source completely shut off and verified. So a lockout tagout, or control of hazardous energy, does that. And this system, primarily in a nutshell, just a quick overview of what that might be, is you're going to isolate or turn off the power to the machine. Usually there's a switch involved where you can actually put a physical lock on the switch itself to keep it from being put back into service. The tagging portion of it is a tag that's attached to that lock that identifies the individual doing the work and a date, and that no one is to touch it. And then once that's done, then the individual goes to the machinery, making sure that it is in fact locked out and that there is no energy. So you want to test it to make sure, so hitting the start button to see if there's anything that's still built up, possibly stored energy, depending on what it is that you may be locking out. Could be some residual effects from that. So they would go ahead and start or attempt to start the machine. If it doesn't start, nothing moves, and obviously the lockout tagout has been successful. And they would go ahead and do the work, and then once the work is complete, reverse those steps to turn the machine back on line. So again, that's just a quick review of lockout tagout system. But that again is covered with this particular standard. Next one down is powered industrial trucks. This one is dealing primarily with general industry. However, there's a lot of crossover into the construction industry for this, as well as other industries. But 29 CFR 1910-178 addresses that. And the section contains safety requirements related to fire protection, design, maintenance, use of fork trucks, tractors, platform lift trucks, motorized hand trucks, or other specialized industrial trucks powered by electrical motors or internal combustion engines. And this section does not apply to compressed air or non-flammable compressed gas-operated industrial trucks, nor to farm vehicles, nor to vehicles intended primarily for earth moving or over-the-road hauling. So again, this just deals with what we commonly refer to as a forklift. Some of the things about that, this has been in effect for a little while. Prior to 1999, there was really no specific standard that addressed requirements for forklift operator training. and the changes that kind of came about back then detailed what needed to happen. You certainly have to have an awareness of the components of the forklift or the industrial truck, powered industrial truck that you may be utilizing. You need to have a good understanding about it. There should be a formalized session where you are taught, trained, and identified how to operate the machinery, the ins and outs behind it, what's different about it based on other things that you maybe have operated in the past. And then there's got to be a practical evaluation with the individual on the vehicle, being observed by someone with experience and understanding about how that truck should be operated. And then once that's done, then they're qualified by their current operator or their employer. And then each year, every 3 years, there is an evaluation that should be done on every operator as well. So just a quick rundown, that's pretty much what that is. But again, this does not cross over into a lot of earth-moving equipment such as your backhoes and loaders and dozers and things like that. It doesn't particularly apply to that. These are just talking about powered industrial trucks, which again we commonly refer to as a forklift. Next one on the list, electrical wiring methods, components, and equipment. Again, this one is specifically for the general industry. It's 29 CFR 1910-305. This section deals with wiring methods, components, and equipment for general use, specifically for things such as metal raceways, cable trays, cable armor, cable sheath, enclosures, frames, pole boxes, junction boxes, and fittings, including temporary electrical power and lighting installations of 600 volts nominal or less. This provision in this section does not apply to conductors that are an integral part of factory assembled equipment. So what they're talking about here are primarily areas where you may have a temporary setup, electrical setup for powering a job, such as construction or repair or maintenance to certain things, and you have electrical components that are going to power the tools and material that that may be needed to complete that job. So what they would be looking for primarily there are just those particular things that they're talking about. All the different items pertaining to the power, the cabling system, how they are there any issues with the lines that are run to power the outlets? Are there any openings in junction boxes that need to be closed up? Just anything pertaining to that type of power system. So that's where those particular items are addressed in this standard. Next one on there is ladders. This one deals primarily in the construction industry. It's 29 CFR 1926-1053. Standard deals with general requirements which apply to all ladders as indicated in the section, including job-made ladders. It details the different types of ladders, proper use of, selection, inspection, and training requirements for ladder use. The big thing with ladders is obviously making sure that whatever ladder is chosen or is in use, that it is being used properly. And this section here actually has a lot of information, and including things to look for as far as inspection items. Everything from, checking a ladder for broken rungs, making sure that, if it's a step ladder, that it properly folds out and you do not have any cracks or any issues with that. Also, it addresses job-made ladders. And job-made ladders are constructed ladders primarily dealing with wood and a certain type of wood and how they are constructed. And there is an ANSI standard that actually details how they should be constructed. So there's a lot of information in this particular standard that addresses that as well and references the ANSI standard for job-made ladders. So again, just making sure that people are using them correctly, and again, the right type of ladder in the right situation. For instance, you don't want to have a step ladder in a closed position, leaning up against a wall, trying to do some work, or using it in a way that you would use say for instance, an extension ladder. So there's all kinds of items within this standard that address those particular elements as well. All right. So the next one is machines, talking about general requirements and in particular the general industry. It's 29 CFR 1910 and 12. Standard deals with the types of machine guarding. One or more method of machine guarding shall be provided to protect the operator and other employees in the machine area for hazards such as those created by point of operation, ingoing nip points, rotating parts, and flying chips and sparks. Just some examples of those would be methods area are barrier guards, two-hand tripping devices, electronic safety devices. There's a lot of things in there as far as machines are concerned. When we talk about those, the big thing there is just making sure whatever barrier or guard that is in place, and there's a lot of information in this standard about those barriers, that those barriers are adhered to. Certainly don't want to have anybody or any part of an employee into the point of operation. So there's a lot of items there that they discuss, the types there. You can see some of the guarding methods down there, but there are all kinds where people's hands do not get into the point of operation, where they would have to have both hands on the buttons that would actually initiate the operation, or they also have restraints, where they actually have physical restraints on people's hands at a certain level so that they cannot physically get to the point of operation, in addition to some other ways as well as protecting people from potentially putting themselves in harm's way. So there's all kinds of information in that standard that addresses those and that outlines those guards for machine operation. All right. Last one on our list there is electrical system design. General requirements, and this again is in the general industry. It's 29 CFR 1910-303. And that standard deals with general requirements for examination, installation, and use of electrical equipment. Examination, electrical equipment shall be free from recognized hazards that are likely to cause death or serious physical harm to employees. Installation and use, listed or labeled equipment shall be installed and used in accordance with instructions included in the listing or labeling. So what we're dealing with in this particular standard, a variety of things such as dealing with electrical systems and deteriorating agents, such as in damp and wet locations. Is the equipment that we'll be using, is it designed for such things? Also, possibly ventilation around the equipment. Are there, where it's set up, do you have enough distance around them to have the proper ventilation around this equipment as it's being operated or run? Also, clearances around the equipment for possible workspace. Having a certain distance away from potential hazards is also talked about in this particular standard, including guarding of any live parts. So how would you guard live parts when it comes to electrical design? And also warning signage. So how do you warn others about the potential of the hazards associated with this electrical system? So having warnings on the doors into electrical rooms, those are all standardized and addressed in this particular standard. So those are OSHA's top 10 items that for 2012 that they cited. So what can we learn from a review of the top 10? And these are just a few statistics just to see where we were and where we have come as a result of when OSHA kind of came into being. First one there is since 1970, workplace fatalities have been reduced by 65% annually, and injury and illness rates have declined by 67%, while at the same time U.S. employment has doubled since that time. In 1970, the average an average of 38 workers died every day while working, compared to 13 per day in the most recent yearly numbers. Also, worker injuries and illnesses are down from 10.9 incidents per 100 workers in 1972 to fewer than 4 per 100 in 2010. And of course, sadly, we have 4,609 workers killed on the job in 2011. So consequently, we have a long way to go. We have made some strides and some improvements in our workplaces. However, there is room for improvement, certainly. And OSHA's top 10 citations match up with how most American workers are getting killed and injured. So if you look back at those top 10 items, you will see, and if you compare those, they will line up very well, unfortunately, with fatality rates in workplaces. And just as an example, the leading cause of fatalities in the construction industries are falls, which account for 35% of all construction-related fatalities. And it just happens to be at the top of the list for OSHA's top 10. Okay, OSHA, in its continued effort to reduce worker injuries and workplace fatalities, has increased the annual number of violations issued by 15%, a little over 15% since 2006. So they have stepped up their enforcement activity, as well as items in other areas within OSHA, such as their voluntary protection programs, which they work with companies in establishing safety and health programs and models for their employees to try to improve safety in their particular work areas and their industries. But citations, basically, OSHA's requirements alleged violated, list any proposed penalties and give the deadline for correcting these alleged hazards. Violations are categorized as other than serious, willful, repeated, and failure to abate. And penalties range up to $7,000 for each serious violation and up to $70,000 for each willful and repeat violation. Now, penalties can be reduced for a number of reasons. Obviously, the employer's good faith effort to try to make corrections and do the right thing. Inspection history. Has the company been inspected in the past, and has that company, have they been issued any citations in the past? That will also have an effect on the penalty amount as well. And of course, size of business. There's a break for companies that have less than 50 employees. There's some modest breaks for companies that have less than 250. Any company that has more than 250 employees will not get a break at all. But for serious violations, OSHA may also reduce the proposed penalty based on the gravity of the alleged violation. However, no good faith adjustment will be made for alleged willful violations. And a willful violation is a violation where you knew what the law was and you decided to go ahead and do it anyway, knowingly. And those are considered willful violation, or a willful violation. Let's take a look at a couple of citations here and kind of read down through there in case you've not seen one. This is what one would look like. It'll identify whether or not the type of violation is serious or other than serious or willful or what it will be. In this particular case here in citation 1, item 1, it's a serious citation. It references the standard that it applies to, so 1926 451B1. Each platform on all working levels of scaffold are not fully planked and decked between the front uprights and the guardrail supports. So again, this one is dealing with scaffolding. You can kind of see down there it was immediately abated. However, there was a proposed penalty for that violation that was initiated for $500. And you can kind of see down through there those will particularly deal with the scaffolding and scaffolding issues. Next one, item 4 here, also pertains to that, is also again a serious citation. Again, it references 1926-503 this time, A2. The employer did not ensure that each employee has been trained. Okay, so this one relates primarily to the training of individuals who may be working at heights. In this particular case, on this job site, employees are engaged in a work at a 612 pitch roof, 32 feet off the ground, and have not received fall protection training. So this particular employer had exposed their employees to falls of potentially 32 feet and did not train them in the proper fall protection hazards. Next one down there, this is an alleged violation again. This is a serious violation. Referenced here is 29 CFR 1926 1431 K10I. Employees occupying a personnel platform were not provided with and did not use personal fall arrest system that was attached to a structural member within the personnel platform. All right, it kind of goes on to kind of detail that and what they were talking about. Personal fall arrest system used by the subcontractor employees in the personnel platform suspended 159 feet in the air by a link belt crane was not connected to a structural member of the personnel platform. So again, this is fall protection, also crane use, also personnel platform use. So violation for that one, and the proposed penalty was $1,400. So anyway, that's just a brief overview of an OSHA citation and what that would be. Again, they've stepped up their enforcement. There's a variety of things to kind of be aware of if you are cited. There are remedies as a result of that. The first line of that remedy would be a meeting with OSHA. They call it an informal conference. An informal conference is where you go as an employer, present your side of the story, and try to get a reduction of penalty based on the citation that you were issued. From that, if the settlement is not agreed to by both parties, then you have the option to go further from there. So there's a whole line of defense that you can, if you feel like that OSHA has not cited this properly or used this improperly from the case of what you or your company believe to be true. So there is a remedy from that. However, what can we learn, or what can we do actually to limit your exposure to an OSHA citation to begin with? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as the old saying goes. But create a comprehensive plan that will cover basic OSHA requirements, including addressing specific safety concerns for your particular organization, while educating and encouraging employees and developing accountability within the organization. So what does that all mean? Well, let's talk about some of the elements here. Begin by covering the basics. The basics are just what they are. It's where you start. It's the starting point to developing the program or a culture within an organization to help minimize potential hazards or exposures. First, obviously, you want to develop safety and health procedure manual. Manuals will address certain procedures that an individual company or organization may do on a regular basis that employees may be involved with, that you certainly want to make sure that it's conveyed to employees and that you have a certain set of practice or principles in addressing these particular work procedures. Provide for regular and frequent inspections of the work areas. Again, checking to make sure that the procedure manual items and the ideas that you want in play for employees are actually being met. So frequent inspections of the work areas is how that is observed and reinforced to make sure that employers and supervisors and employees are all working together to make sure that the work areas are following the procedures. Develop a way to plan hazards out of work assignments. This can be accomplished through a number of different ways. On the screen there you'll see such as utilizing a job safety analysis. They come in various forms, names, acronyms, depending on the type of work and where you are working. You may have a safety task analysis, or STAs. I know the military, they typically use a similar format called an activity hazard analysis. A lot of times they'll refer to it as an AHA. But what these are pretty much plans on how to address the hazards of a particular task. Essentially taking a work assignment or a task assignment or an activity assignment and breaking the steps down into smaller components and looking at each component of the work that is being done. And then you take each one of those and address specific hazards for each one. You know, are there fall hazards? Are there electrical hazards? You know, lockout, tagouts, do we need to have that in place? All of those types of things. What are the hazards associated with those particular work tasks or items that we may be looking at? And then from that, how are you going to protect against those hazards that you just talked about? All right, so that would be the next step. So you would identify protective measures that you will be taking. For instance, in fall protection, we have working on the roof would be the task. Fall from height would be the hazard. Utilizing fall arrest system to prevent falls would be your end use there in your protection against those. So again, it's just a format to identify and help employers identify the hazards, the tasks at hand, and how they can protect and prevent those from occurring. So there's a good way to develop those and have those in within any company. Also provide for regular and frequent safety awareness training. So certainly keeping up to date with all the different changes that may be coming about from OSHA, as well as within the industry that you are a part of. What are some changes to the way that things are done, and how can you provide that information to employees? Well, through frequent, regular safety awareness training. So you certainly want to do that and provide that. Another thing with the basics, you certainly want to make sure that you are recording things properly. Any employer with more than 10 employees is subject to all the recording issues or constraints that OSHA has implemented. Those being obviously the OSHA 300 log. Probably heard that before. This is a log that details any accident that may be happening at that particular organization. And there's a certain criteria for what goes on that list. You know, things like broken bones, you know, situations like that where someone may go to the hospital as a result and then be reassigned their duties, or a light duty situation. Those would be listed on those types of logs. Also included in that would be record keeping for any trainings. So all of those job safety analysis, as well as possibly safety awareness training, anything that is done, you would want to certainly keep a record of that. So again, good record keeping, documentation is a key there for making sure that you're covering the basics. Also be sure to address specific organizational concerns, which could include task-specific training. Now, for instance, a masonry company would provide scaffold use training for its employees. Same with for instance, a pipe crew that does underground work would have their crew trained specifically in regards to trenching and excavation activity. So task-specific training would also be addressed and specific for your particular organization. Establishing a site-specific safety plan and specific emergency procedures. So the plant that you may be working at having a site-specific safety plan that addresses all the ins and outs and issues pertaining to the work within that plant, and then obviously any emergency procedures that would be for that as well. How to evacuate the building, where to assemble, and then also making sure that you practice that periodically to make sure that everyone has a good understanding about what to do in case of an emergency. And again, those would be specific based on what organization and location that you would be working at. What's good for one company would not necessarily be the same for another one, so there would be very specific plans and procedures for those particular site safety plans and procedures. Provide for specific machinery or equipment, operator qualification or certification. Again, anybody that would be dealing with, say for instance, crane work. With the new crane standard that came out, all operators have to be qualified and certified. So there's a criteria there for making sure that this particular equipment and the operator of that equipment is trained specifically for what it is that they're going to be operating. Also, what you can continue to do in addition to the basics and the specifics, but also taking care of employees and getting them involved. So educating employees, establishing a safety orientation for newly hired employees. Certainly want to incorporate them into the program, making sure that they have an understanding about what policies and procedures you have within the organization, and then also any specific items for that particular facility that they need to be aware of. All those things could encompass in that and could be educated or talked to with employees. And also consider extensive training for others, such as your supervisors, making sure that they have such trainings such as an OSHA 10-hour or an OSHA 30-hour class, where it's taking a little bit more involved information with regard to safety and learning a little bit more about it. 10-hour obviously is a 10-hour training and 30 is a 30. So there's a lot more involved obviously in a 30-hour class, but there's a lot more information that's provided in those classes. So those are just some things, just educating employees, making sure that they have the information that they need to help keep themselves safe and making the right decisions when they have an opportunity. Another thing is also employee involvement, establishing safety committees, mentoring programs. This is where employees are involved in the establishment of the safety within the organization. So they participate, they help. That is a big role, because anytime they have the ability, anybody has the ability to influence where they work and how they work, it's certainly going to be well for them in the long run. It's always encouraged in the VPP programs, or the voluntary protection programs that I mentioned earlier from OSHA. Part of that program is also to make sure that employees are involved in every facet and every step of the way with any kind of company that comes into that VPP process. So it's a big push to make sure that employees are properly involved in their own safety. Also, accountability programs. Develop ways to encourage hazard observation or correction. Again, there's a variety of things that can be done. There's a lot of different programs that are existing out there right now where observation of hazards are rewarded or indicated some form or fashion. There's a lot of different things where, again, you encourage that from employees to observe hazards before they become a problem for themselves or for someone else. Create an employee incentive based on safe behaviors. That's a big one too. Behavior-based safety is an acronym and a catchphrase that is common in today's safety realm. But what that is primarily just identifying ways to encourage employees to behave and act in a certain way to not put themselves at risk. So it's a great way to encourage them to participate again in their own safety, and then also be a part and being recognized part for that as well. All right, so in summary, again, understanding that OSHA's top 10 most frequently cited standards tells us what safety issues are most concerning to OSHA. Even though our workplaces are safer today than when OSHA started, there are still far too many injuries and deaths happening in our places of work. By implementing suggestions detailed in our discussion today, including developing safety and health procedures, policies and procedures, educating and encouraging our workforce, creating accountability, not only will we be safer, the likelihood of OSHA standards being violated will diminish. So again, just concentrating on these factors, just those ideas will help potentially eliminate concern and the headache of a possible OSHA fine or citation in the future. So certainly encourage you to do that. And again, thank you for participating today. Again, if you would like any further information on anything that we've talked about or about the company, you can certainly give us a call at 919-417-2139 or look us up on the web at www.safety-experts.com, safetyexperts.com. Again, thank you for your time and have a safe day.